Hello everyone, welcome to the Force Plate Coach YouTube channel. My name is John McMahon, and in this video I'm going to talk about the counter movement jump because it really is the test that you should know about if you do force plate testing with athletes. Based on my experience, it seems to be that test that's done irrespective of the athlete's sport, and certainly it's the most common vertical jump test that's going to be conducted anyway, not least on a force plate. So I'm going to dip my webcam right now so I can maximise the screen space, give a video tutorial on what the counter movement jump is and how we would cue athletes to do it, and then I'll see you at the end of the video. I hope you enjoy it. So once your athlete is stood on the force plate as so, I use that term generously because that's a picture of me there, we want to make sure that they're stood upright and still for at least 1 second. I've mentioned in one of my previous videos why it's so important to make sure we get that 1 second where the athlete stood upright and still. So I won't go over that again, so please go and check that video out if you've not done so already. But it is one of those overlooked cues that sometimes gets missed, which is really important to make sure you do include when you're doing a counter movement jump test on a force plate. We also make sure the athletes have their hands on their hips, and that's because we get quite a lot of variation in the way that athletes either change their own strategy of swinging their arms during the jump test, and certainly we end up with large variation across athletes, so it makes it really difficult to pull data together from the counter movement jump test if people have swung their arms in slightly different ways. Remember, the force plates only tell us about the forces applied to the athlete's centre of mass following the forces that they push down into the plate with. It doesn't discriminate or tell us how much of that contribution was from the upper body or the lower body or the joint contributions in between. So all we get is that centre of mass level information. So let's take out the arm swing. Certainly if you're doing just general counter movement jump testing for the usual practice, if you're doing something that's obviously more specific to a jump dominant sport, I'll put some stuff out on a separate video in relation to that. From then, we want the athlete to commence with a fast counter movement down to their preferred depth. And we say their preferred depth because we're interested in the athlete's natural jump strategy, and I'll talk about that in more videos to come. It's just really important that we just get them to do that fast counter movement because it's going to initiate the stretch shortening cycle in the leg extensor muscles. Then from that position, we want to make sure they minimise the transition phase from when you reach that bottom depth that they've achieved before they commence with a jump that's aiming to be as fast and as high as possible. And they're the typical coaching cues that we give, trying to jump fast and high. And actually, as I'll explain in subsequent videos, you can't jump faster and not jump higher because the speed we leave the ground with will dictate the height that we jump to. However, the range of motion that we move through in that counter movement phase will certainly dictate the distance we have to produce our force and therefore the velocity we can achieve. If that sounds a little bit vague at the moment, don't worry, I'm going to tighten that up with videos that will come out at a later date. After we've reached that maximal jump height, the athlete will then experience a descent down into a landing phase where you want that to be slow and controlled ideally. And we can do that by flexing the hips and knees just to make sure we're being forgiving on the joints. There's no real reason to land with a stiff leg where the legs are straight because that'll give us a really high ground reaction force over a short time, which is irrelevant for the type of testing that we're doing here. So in summary, that all done together will look something like this, and you'll end up with a force time trace that looks like what we've got in the middle. Obviously the system that you use to acquire that force time curve will dictate the actual way that looks, but that's a general representative counter movement jump force time curve, and in later videos in the next few weeks I'm going to show how we can split up that force time curve into different phases. And there are 6 key phases that we tend to use which can tell us more detail about the athlete's jump strategy and how that led to any given outcome in terms of their jump height or any other measure we might take. And then finally, in the next videos to come as well, I'll show you how we can get from that single force time trace or multiple force time trace with lots of athletes and produce a profile similar to what you can see on this right hand side, where we take some of the key information from the test, both in terms of the outcome of the jump and the strategy that led to that outcome, and we can play around with some visual ways in which that data might be brought to life for the athletes and coaches that we communicate with. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you found it useful. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel, and I'll be in touch soon with more video content. Thank you.